Hello everybody, it's Jade, and I know that the character with pink hair doesn't show up for several more books, but I wanted to go ahead and get her hairdo out of the way now while my hair is still actually pink. So, this week, or rather the second half of this week, we are covering Interception Point. So, what is Interception Point? Interception Point is a novella that takes place between books 3 and 4 in the HIVE series. You can see on the back, which I accidentally flashed, is another book called The Spook's Tale. So this whole thing is about 100 pages. Interception Point being 55 pages, and The Spook's Tale being, I don't know because I've never read it, I don't care, 63 pages. So The Spook's Tale was a novella in the universe of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and then Interception Point is a novella in the universe of HIVE. And Mark Walden apparently wrote this for an event called World Book Day. And this is supposed to promote reading, I presume, in Europe. And you can buy this, well, you could on World Book Day buy this for £1. However, this was never published anywhere else or at any other time. So while we have like 6 different versions of every other installment in the HIVE series, there is only one version of Interception Point with the original black and neon blue cover. That is personally my favorite style. And when I bought this, okay, so let me see when this came out. This came out in 2009. I got this in, I want to say, like, it would have been late 2010 or early 2011. You cannot get them anywhere. And I don't know why. Why does Bloomsbury not publish this as something you can get on Kindle for $1 or £1? I don't know. And honestly, if you have any information, like, please tell me, because so what happened with this series is that after 8 books, the 9th one was unable to be published for some reason, and Mark Walden, the author, had to break his contract in order to self-publish the final book. So for some reason, Bloomsbury, I think Bloomsbury is the publisher of this, doesn't want to be associated with HIVE anymore, or doesn't want to produce these books anymore. And I'm not sure what it is. It could be the vaguely non-PC themes, or, and by vaguely I mean poor France. It could be poor sales, but I mean, I don't think it's poor sales because there's still a fandom for this, and it came out, and the last book came out 8 years ago. So even though it's not the most popular series, it's not completely unheard of. Yeah, I actually don't know the answer to this. But because I know that even if I sell this, which I don't think I will, even if I do sell this, it's only going to make one additional person know what happens in this book. And this book is surprisingly important to the rest of the series, like, almost weirdly so. It was like Mark Walden assumed that everybody was going to be able to read it. There's a lot of really good character stuff. It introduces the next arc villain. The following book, Dreadnought, assumes that you read this. And so I figure that I should do this video that explains this book, because a lot of people are never going to be able to read it. And if you work for Bloomsbury, put this for sale on Kindle. Please. This is ridiculous. So yeah. So let's get started. So instead of starting with a flashback or anything like that, we get right into the action. I guess I should start with, this is basically a short version of a regular HIVE novel. It's just a condensed story that contains all of the elements that we normally would see in a regular book in this series. We have 7 of the main characters in this one plus Trent. So we have Otto, Wing, Shelby, Laura, Nigel, Franz, Nero, Raven, Pike, and Trent. Oh, and Diabolus. So it contains our main cast. It has a heist. It has the regular technology that we normally see. It has a scene where Pike tells the kids that he's developed a new piece of technology that they're going to be using. Trent finds out about their operation and everything goes wrong. We get some creepy new twist to Otto's power situation. Each of the kids interacts with each other in a way that either furthers or indicates something about their relationships. It is almost like I told Mitch when we were talking about this before, and Mitch isn't in this video. She's working on Dreadnought. I told Mitch that this feels like Mark Walden made a list of what are the things that happens in a Hive book, and then made sure that he checked off each of them. And reading this again, I didn't think so. This was actually did not like this when it first came out. It's really weird rereading this series because I'm liking the opposite installments than I did the first time. And I think it's probably because I'm liking the ones that I didn't reread. But, you know, I didn't like book 2 at first when I was a kid. And then now I liked it because there was a lot of narration from characters that we didn't know very much about. And then I really liked book 3 when I was a kid. And then when I reread it last week, while it was still very good, I was disappointed at just how little character stuff we got out of it. Especially with the fact that the kids get no character development at all in Escape Velocity other than Otto. And this book attempts to rectify that. This book is largely about the relationship between the 4 main kids. And I really, really appreciated that because we didn't get any in Escape Velocity. So this one opens on Otto and Shelby having a competition. They're trying to hunt each other down. Whoever survives the longest in the Grappler Cavern wins. Shelby is winning. She holds a gun to the back of Otto's head and says a quip, but the quip gives her away, and Otto is able to use his superpowers to release her grappler line and drop her into the water. It turns out that this is part of this long series of competitions between all of the members of the Alpha Stream to figure out who the Alpha is, or Alfalfa, if you will. And they're down to the final 2 candidates, which is Otto and Shelby. So Otto technically wins here, but Raven, who is the judge, really tears into both of them and says, you know, Shelby, if you had just shot him instead of making a stupid quip, you would have won. And she tells Otto, you need to not rely on your superpowers so much because you're not going to be able to use them in every situation. And Otto was like, yeah, whatever, I'm the best. Yeah, it's typical stuff, but we don't always see Otto and Shelby interact, so it's really nice to get this. We cut to Laura and Wing, who are waiting for Otto and Shelby to finish this, and you can immediately tell by their behavior that they are at their absolute wits' end. They really are sick of having to sit through Otto and Shelby competing in this, especially because it appears that, you know, obviously they both must have been eliminated already if they are doing this. And that brings me to something that I really wanted to get to today, and I'm excited to talk about, which is the dynamic of the 4 main kids. This series, or the success of this series, your emotional investment in this series, relies on the dynamic between these 4 students. Not all of them are as important to the plot as each other. But they all get very similar levels of screen time. And the bond that these 4 kids have and their dynamic is 100%, okay, I would say it is like, I would say it's probably 50% of the appeal of this entire series, if not more. The dynamic between the 4 main kids. It is so strong. And I want to talk about why. So the way this is set up is, so we have Otto, Laura, Wing, and Shelby, who are 2 pairs of, it's a boy and it's 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys are roommates, the girls are roommates, and then you have 2 romantic pairs amongst those 2. And this can come across as, it's really, really easy to mess this up. It's really easy to make this bland and generic and boring. The thing that has to make this work is that you have to enjoy the interactions between these characters. If the interactions between them are not enjoyable to read, this series gets real old, real fast. And on top of that, the relationships between the students have to be different. The relationship between Wing and Shelby, which is a romantic pair, cannot be the same as the relationship between Otto and Laura, because that would be boring. That's bad. Nobody would want to read that. Or you might want to read it the first time, but then we get to the second couple and it would just not be interesting. The relationship between Otto and Wing, while similar to the relationship between Laura and Shelby, cannot be the same. Probably the relationship in the series that has the most total investment, like the most amount of care from the most number of readers, is the relationship between Wing and Shelby. They're very different in dynamic. They're very different in personality, and it causes them to clash, but they still care about each other very much. And their relationship is meaningful to both of them and changes them over the course of the series. It is the relationship that is most, probably most enjoyed by the fan base, or by the reader base. But the other relationship that is really, really potent, but doesn't bring as much joy because we don't see it as much, is the relationship between Otto and Shelby. Otto and Shelby are rivals. And the reasons why they are rivals are really, really juicy to both of their characters. So I want to talk about the fact that all 4 of the boys, so I want to talk about why each of the students got into the Hive. So let's start with Nigel and Franz. I used to think that it was weird that we didn't see any normal kids in these books. We only see the main characters, and we don't see like what the regular people look like. I realized on this read-through, or in the read-through that I've been doing since the start of this project, that Nigel and Franz are your very prototypical normal Hive students. They are both only there because their parent was a Hive student. They don't have a lot of skills yet, but they do have a skill, and they are learning. Then you have Otto and Wing. They were originally brought to the Hive by Number 1 because of their connection to the plot, so that Number 1 could get his hands on Wing's necklace, and so that he can get his hands on Otto for his body. It sounds really dirty. But now they are there because Nero can't send them anywhere. Like they're what is Nero going to do? Send them home? And then you've got Laura and Shelby. Laura and Shelby are the two students who are actually there because they did something that caught the attention of Glove. And of the 2 of them, Shelby is the prototypical Hive student. Or rather, she's the ideal alpha. Her parents might be rich, we have no idea. But either way, they probably had no influence on her actually becoming the Wraith, or no purposeful influence. She developed a set of skills that, it stated in book 2, she is the most accomplished person on the planet. All by herself. She achieved world renown before she turned 13. And when she was taken to the Hive, she immediately took on a position of leadership. She became very involved. She started learning new skills other than the skill that she came here for, but she maintained her connection to the skill that she was selected for the Alpha Stream for, which is stealth. So over the course of the series, she's honing her stealth abilities and her lockpicking abilities, but she's also learning things like leadership and strategy and martial arts and shooting. I didn't mention this last week or in the last video, but in Escape Velocity, the plan that they use to infiltrate the facility in the Alps to rescue Nero was invented by Shelby. So Shelby is like the ideal alpha candidate. She's a leader. She wants to learn. She achieved renown. She was not here because of her parents. She wants to be the best. And because of this, she wants to be the leader of the group. She wants to be the alfalfa. But the person whom she's up against for this position of actual leader is Otto. And throughout the series, both Otto and Shelby are effectively the leader of the group. Otto seems a little bit more like the leader because we're in his head, and because the plot revolves more around him, when he needs something, like when he needs to go somewhere, everybody else has to go. But Shelby also has a position of leadership within the group that Laura and Wing don't. And the thing about Otto is all of the things that I just described about Shelby are not true about Otto. In book 1, it states that he does not like working hard. All of his achievements come from the fact that he has superpowers, that his intelligence is artificial. He is able to use the grapplers, something that Shelby is very good with, but only because what's going on in his head allows him to understand how the mechanics of that works better than he would be able to otherwise. All of the things that make Shelby an amazing alpha, Otto also has, but he got them because he was born with it. The only thing that Otto has that didn't come from his genetic crap is his actual like ability to talk to other people and like ability to relate to people. So that's it. So Shelby is competing with this genetically engineered monstrosity to prove that she's even better. She hears, ah, yes, there's this guy on in your squad, in your team, who was literally engineered to be not only the perfect human, but like beyond what the perfect human can be. And you know, he can learn any skill instantly. And Shelby goes, I don't care. I want to be better than him. I want to be the leader. And on a similar note, she's like that way also with Wing. There comes a point later when they're arguing about whose responsibility it's going to be to retrieve the suit. And the thing is, this is absolutely in Shelby's wheelhouse. Sneak into something, retrieve something, and get it out is the reason why Shelby was inducted into the Hive. But Wing says, it would be better if you left the retrieval side of the operation to us. Otto's abilities will allow us to access the train more quickly and easily. There is no need to expose yourselves to extra unnecessary risk. Unnecessary risk? Who died and made you my guardian angel? Shelby said angrily. How about you guys stopping the train, me and Laura making sure that the snatch gets done right? Even though Shelby doesn't have the martial arts skill that Wing does, she thinks of herself as the protector. She thought of herself as Laura's protector in book 1. She thinks of herself as the person who needs to take point on this operation. To the point where she actually snaps at Wing someone whom she generally gets along with most of the time. Okay. She doesn't care that Wing is better than her at martial arts. She wants to take that skill and be his equal and then surpass him. She's not obnoxious about it, but she has her sights set on being the person who can fill that role. So Diabolus calls Nero and tells him that one of the thermoptic camouflage suits has been captured by Hope. Or rather, somebody wearing one was captured by Hope, and that person is dead. But we need to get the suit back, because if they're able to actually reverse engineer this technology, we're going to lose everything. You know, all of the transportation that Glove uses this technology. All of the stealth agents that Glove has use this technology. And so he says, we have 12 hours before this train that the suit is being put on is going to arrive at the laboratory where they're going to take it apart. The train is unmanned, which means it's run electronically. If anything happens, if this mission is successful, a lot of Glove lives are going to be lost. I hate to ask this, but can you send in Otto and his group? Because we don't have anybody else that we can deploy as quickly right now. And the thing is, this is a terrible idea. Ever since reading My Hero Academia, I am really, really sensitive to pointing out when kids are used as soldiers, effectively, for big organizations. But the thing is, Diabolus is kind of right here. Like, the thermoptic camouflage technology, which everything in Glove uses, keeps the kids safe. And yes, putting Otto and co in this situation is going to put them in danger. But not having this thermoptic camouflage technology means that they will be in so much more danger, like, from now on. However, it turns out that at the end of this whole thing is a trap. They came up with this situation that would obviously only be solved by sending in Otto. And I have to wonder, like, why didn't Diabolus think of this? And it's to the point where for the last 10 years, I've been thinking, like, is Diabolus a bad guy? And I really hope he isn't, because I like him a lot. But it's weird that he fell for this. Anyway, so Nero is like, hey, I don't want to send in my kids to be child soldiers, effectively. And Diabolus is like, we kind of have to. We only have 12 hours. And so Nero tells him that, okay, I'll talk to Raven and see what she thinks. So he talks to Raven, and I just want to bring up that we don't know that much about the relationship between Nero and Raven right now. But we do know that they're very close. And we know that there's this repeated bit that we keep seeing from Nero that is that he's proud of her. He talks about, I'm going to talk to my team of experts. And Diabolus is like, okay, you're going to talk to Raven. He is always bragging about her and talking about how capable she is. And he's happy when people say that they are afraid of her and reference how good of an assassin she is and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not going to continue any further because we're going to get into, I don't know whether we know this yet, territory, but so Raven pulls the 4 kids out of class and says, all right, we're going to have to send you to go intercept this train. And it's going to be just the 4 of you. We don't have any pilots left because they all died in the last book. And that did kind of bother me. Like, that did feel a little bit contrived. They really didn't get any other pilots. Why not just take, like, a 6th-year student that knows how to fly a helicopter? Anyway, she's like, because I'm the only pilot remaining, I'm going to have to fly you in, and I have to wait for you. And so the kids start arguing about how they are going to approach this. And like I said at the beginning, Laura and Wing are at their wits' end about the fact that Otto and Shelby have been in this conflict for what appears like at least several weeks. And the kids are just kind of getting on each other's nerves. So I want to talk about that just a tad. So they decide that the best thing to do is split up into two groups and have one group at the back of the train, one group at the front of the train, going through and trying to achieve their two objectives. One, which is stopping the train, and two, which is retrieving the suit. And they get into the aforementioned argument about who's going to be responsible for retrieving the suit, even though they don't know where the suit is. And they start arguing about, effectively, who is better. We get this one line from Laura where she says, like Shelby said, there's nothing that you can do that we can't. And then Otto starts like being an asshole about the fact that he won against Shelby in the Grappler Cavern. And it just devolves into bickering. And I want to bring up something that it took me like at least 3 reads to parse, because it's not explicitly stated what Laura's issue is here. But once I learned a little bit more about computers and I realized that it's not just Otto and Laura both computer, it makes sense. So the reason why Laura was inducted to the Hive is because she is an amazing hacker. She's good with computer networking, she's good with cryptography, and she's good with getting into systems and getting information out. Otto got into the Hive because of his skill with robotics. Now he had other things that he was good at, but the thing that we kept seeing in the first 2 books that he was actually like good with was robots. He built a couple of robots. He wasn't particularly skilled at hacking, but then what happens is he develops these superpowers that allow him to hack into anything. And so throughout all of book 3, everybody's like, wow, did you see what Otto can do? He has suddenly become the best hacker on the planet, even better than Laura Brand. What's significant about this is that, you know, Laura was unpopular before coming to the Hive. Like, that was literally the reason she got into the Hive, was because she was spying on girls that were picking on her. She's never mentioned having any other friends, and she doesn't really seem like the type who misses people back home. So she comes to the Hive, and finally, for the first time, her skill with computer is her skill with hacking specifically is the thing that everybody just will not shut up about, how she is the best, for 2 years. And then all of a sudden it turns out that somebody she knows, with no effort whatsoever, is now better than her at the thing, at the only skill she has. Like, she's not like Shelby. She isn't trying to learn martial arts. She isn't trying to learn leadership. She wants to be good at hacking, and she put all her eggs in the hacking basket. And then all of a sudden, one of her friends overnight develops the superpower that makes him a better hacker than her. And then people just keep saying over and over again, wow, I guess we don't need Laura anymore because Otto can hack into anything. I am sure that feels amazing. Yeah, so we're going to keep track of what kind of skills Laura has from here on out. Because at first I thought that it was inconsistent what their skills were, because I was like, okay, well, at the beginning he's building robots, but then later he develops the hacking thing. I'm like, oh, but now reading again, like, it actually does make sense. Like, there is actually a progression here. It's just that he switches into her field when he gets the superpower and he stops building robots. So we will see where this goes from here. And I will tell you, it's not inconsistent. It does actually make sense. Their skill progression. So yeah. And then Wing is like Laura, but in the opposite direction. And way less insecure about it. He came in because he's an amazing martial artist. Now Shelby is learning how to do martial arts, but he still knows, like, okay, well, I'm a better martial artist than her, so what does it matter? And he thinks of himself as, look, I'm not the leader. I'm not the guy that shoots guns. I'm not the hacker. I am the person that is good at martial arts. If anybody else tries to claim that they're better than me, like, I will break their wrist. But that's my role in the team. So that's how he behaves. We get a little scene with Nigel and Franz, but I read the first like 10 pages of Dreadnought, and there's a really juicy scene with Nigel and Franz like 10 pages in. So I'm going to talk about them next week. So Raven tells the kids that they need to stop bickering. Whoever comes across the suit first will just have the suit, and to go talk to Pike about this new technology that they're going to be using on the trip. And the kids agree that they're going to compete. They'll split up into two groups, the boys versus the girls. If the girls win, the boys have to do their politics homework for the next 3 months. If the boys win, the girls have to do their politics homework for the next 3 months. There. And politics is a subject that all of them hate, except for Laura, so it works. So they go talk to Pike, and so there is the little scene with Nigel and Franz where they're supposed to be putting this core inside something to generate energy, but they accidentally blow it up, and that's it. It's inconsequential. It's just a funny little scene. And they go talk to Pike. Pike gives them these suits that, okay, so they're not allowed to use thermoptic camouflage because they're really trying to, you know, not lose that technology, but they have these suits that are magnetic. So they have these like really strong batteries that can magnetize them to any magnetic surface, and then they can turn it on and off at will. And then as part of this, if they get into a real pickle, they can discharge all of the electricity in an attack. But this means that they will no longer be able to use the magnetic portion of the suit. So the kids use this to latch onto the side of the train and then crawl into it. So Raven puts the kids in a shroud being the helicopter equivalent that HIVE has a bunch of, flies them over to the train and sets them down on the train. We get a little scene where Otto and Laura are talking, and she's talking about how she's afraid of the fact that they're going on this very scary mission. They have to, you know, fall out of this shroud onto a train. Like they have to like zip line down. And it's just kind of a pleasant little conversation, but in it she does mention that she likes talking to Otto about this kind of thing, which is sort of the first indication that we get that she may reciprocate Otto's romantic feelings, but it's not explicit. And then the kids the kids ride down the zip line to the train, and we do get a funny line that I'll go ahead and read because it's funny. This cable's awfully thin, Laura said quietly. The breaking strain on this line is over 3 tons, Wing said calmly. So only Shelby's got anything to worry about, Otto said quickly, making Laura laugh. They've had this conflict for like several weeks, but he just has to keep needling her. Shelby, I mean. Oh, and then Shelby says, gee, you're a funny guy. I hope I secured your suspension unit correctly. The threat of violence between these two is just, it's very juicy. I like it. So they all jump down, and they were relying on being able to use Otto's superpowers to get into the train, which is the exact thing that Raven told them not to do at the beginning of this very book. And they jump down, and Otto cannot feel any electronics whatsoever on this train. He's like, what the heck is this? There's no electronics, and also there's no people. What's the deal? But fortunately, Raven gave Wing and Shelby each one of her swords. Which I mentioned last book that Raven appears to not care that much about the kids, but she's defrosting to them over the course of the series. And that is true. But you can see in this book that she does genuinely care about them at this point. Like, she does acknowledge a couple of times that they could die, but she actually seems to care about the fact that they could die. And the way that we know this is because she has these 2 swords that she's had since book 2 that they're basically lightsabers. But they can vary between being extremely sharp and just blunt like a baseball bat. And they're purple, and she has them as katanas on her back crossed over, and she gives 1 each to Wing and Shelby. And you really get the sense here that she genuinely now gives a crap about them. Like, she doesn't want them to die. She's giving them her prized swords, whom she calls the girls, because she cares about them. And it really shows a shift in the relationship that she has with them from the way that she behaved towards them in book 1. So Otto can't feel anything from the train, but they decide what they'll do is just cut into the train with the lightsabers. And they jump down, and they discover immediately that their comms are gone as soon as they get on the train. The train is completely barren. It's got these like white panels on the side, and as they walk towards the end of the first room, the door slides open and they're able to just move forward. There's some kind of sensor that exists, but it's not one that Otto can feel. We saw that in the spaceship last week, or in Escape Velocity, that things were electromagnetically shielded so that Otto couldn't interface with them, and that seems like what this could be. But we cut over to Laura's perspective, and she tells Shelby to stick a sword in one of the panels. And I do want to actually read this one because it's pretty gross. It says, Shelby nodded and slid the tip of Raven's sword into the wall. Slowly and carefully she cut downwards a few centimeters. A jet of black liquid spurted out from the incision in the wall, splattering Shelby's arm as she recoiled backwards. The vicious black goo kept spraying out of the wall for a couple of seconds and then slowed to a trickle, running down the wall and pooling on the floor of the carriage. What the hell? Shelby said, holding her hand up as the black liquid on her glove started to crust over almost immediately. The carriage was filled with the smell of sour milk. Don't get any on your skin, Laura said quickly, pulling a thin probe from the side of her palm top. So Laura puts a probe into the stuff and discovers that it's a synthetic protein matrix, or an organic supercomputer. Somebody engineered some kind of bacteria. Okay, she says it's protein, so it's not bacteria. I don't know. Somebody engineered something that made a different kind of computer. And this is, I do want to talk about the scientific viability of this, because I think a lot of people probably read this and went, well, that's sci-fi. That's not real. This is actually very, very possible. There are a lot of universities researching this kind of thing right now. Now, we don't have anything nearly advanced as this, but we do have some prototypes of people trying to create some kind of bacterial sludge that can think. But also, there are plenty of organic supercomputers, like the one between your ears, or the one between my ears. Most of the computers on this planet are organic. You know, organisms have the ability to think. And we know that in this universe, there is genetic engineering to the point where they were able to create Otto, and we don't know much about the technology in his head yet, but we know that there is genetic engineering done by Glove, or done by Number One, and Number One had ties to Hope. So the idea of Hope having created this liquid supercomputer is really not a stretch. The other thing is, I'm 99% sure, and I hope I'm not just making this up, that the thing that Otto has in his head is the Overlord Protocol, which was written by Zume 20 years ago, or like at least 15 years ago, but like probably on the order of 20 years ago. And the Overlord Protocol can get Otto into any computer, any traditional binary electronic computer. But once you get away from that form factor, like, it doesn't work. You know, if you download antivirus software from 20 years ago, it's going to protect you from some viruses today, but not really. Like, it's not the same because we don't use the same computers. Otto is able to get into traditional binary thinking rocks, but this thing is more like a human brain. And while he is able to sort of understand what's going on in it, not even understand, but he feels something, like he knows that there are electrical signals being passed around. He doesn't know what it's thinking. So Shelby and Laura keep progressing and they eventually find the suit, so they win. The stupid little contest between the two groups. But they realize that something is up, and at the same time, we do get a little bit into Sebastian Trent's perspective, and we find out that this whole thing is really just a ruse to be able to capture Otto and potentially the other kids. So they make it to this room where there's a giant, like, bundle of cables that have this black fluid flowing through it. So they get to the main room, and Sebastian Trent's voice comes out over the intercom, and he's like, "I have you now, my pretty..." Okay, he doesn't say it that way, but that's basically what he says. And it turns out that, like we heard at the end of last week, Otto can project his consciousness into electronics, but electronics can project themselves into his consciousness. So this black fluid, the organic supercomputer, which has progressed beyond Otto's dinky little overlord protocol, is capable of overriding Otto's consciousness. And so it, like, invades his brain and he just passes out. And then a bunch of these spiders, mechanical spiders filled with this black fluid, start coming after the kids. So Wing grabs the sword off of Shelby's back and tells her to take Laura and have the two of them run and get Otto out. And Shelby actually lets him do this, which kind of surprised me. Not kind of surprised me, but you know, Shelby was talking about how she wanted to be the leader, she wanted to be the protector, but she's not an idiot. She knows that at this point, Wing still has more fighting skill than she does. So she lets him take the sword and fight off the spiders. So he's fighting through them, but there's just a horde. It's like that one clip from World War Z where the bodies are just kind of piling up. And eventually Wing has to use his full body discharge thing to take out a bunch of them at the same time, but then he's out of battery. Laura starts shooting them with, like, smaller jolts of electricity, but it only does so much and her battery starts to run out. And then Shelby ends up, she does have a mine that they were given. It was basically a grenade that you can stick to things, that she ends up throwing at a bunch of them and blowing them up, and then it blows off the back of the train, so they're able to at least get out. But the thing is, the spiders are still coming. So we cut to Otto's perspective, and Otto struggled to stay afloat in an endless sea of black liquid. He can feel himself weakening. Somewhere at the edge of his consciousness, he could hear the same whisper that he had heard when he had been near the column of black liquid on the train. All the time he could feel his own personality slipping away, submerged beneath the black tide. He forced himself to stay calm, listening to the distant whispering, straining to make any sense of what he could hear. It was no good. He wasn't strong enough, and slowly, inexorably, he felt himself sink below the inky black surface. He had no fight left in him. He was about to be consumed, and he was powerless to resist. "You are not alone," a calm, measured voice said inside his head, and suddenly Otto felt an unbelievable surge of strength. He could suddenly feel the network all around him, the organic, slithering hiss of its voice, clear and instantly comprehensible. He rose up out of the black sea, golden tendrils of data streaming down from his glowing body and into the dark liquid, dazzling flashes of light beginning to burst beneath its surface. "My turn," Otto said with a grim smile. So what happens is Otto wakes up and is able to like temporarily take over all of the mechanical spiders. And they're able to jump out of the train and get back into the shroud with Raven and get away. However, we just found here that there is somebody in Otto's head, and that is bad, probably, potentially. So what happened at the end of the last book is we find out that Otto can be possessed. And if somebody wants to jump into his head, there is nothing, absolutely nothing he can do about it. He has no defenses. Everybody has no defenses to him, but he has no defenses against everybody else. And at the end of the last book, he had both Hive Mind and Overlord in his head, and he deleted both of them. So it's possible that this person who just told him you are not alone is Hive Mind, but it could also be Overlord. Or it could be something else that Sebastian Trent just planted in his head. Or it could be an option 4 that we don't know about. At some point between Otto landing on the space station, or even potentially before that, we don't know. At some point in the past, any time in Otto's life, an artificial intelligence leaped into Otto's mind and is taking up residence there and is more powerful than Otto is. And Otto has no idea what it is, doesn't know that it's been there the entire time. And if it decides it wants to take over Otto's body, it just can. That is very scary as a prospect. So the kids head back to the Hive and they tell Nero what they saw. And Nero talks about, basically, wow, this is really bad. Sebastian Trent has this technology and Sebastian Trent sucks. And Otto says, there's something else that worries me. The system was not intelligent in the true sense of the word, but it was capable of emotion. What do you mean? Nero asked with a frown. It's hard to explain, Otto replied. But when I was inside the system, I could feel it. It hates us. Not just me or any of us on the train. Humanity. It hates all of us. It wasn't conscious thought, just emotion, but it was there. So Nero decides that he's going to have a discussion with Diabolus about, this was really, really bad, and I wish we had not made the decision to send the kids into this, but we don't see that discussion. So it's really interesting and terrifying that this black liquid has the capability of feeling emotion. But at the same time, it's really interesting because in this universe, we have people like Hive Mind who are robots, but are considered worthy of care by the narrative. So where is this going with this black liquid? I wish I could say I don't know, but I do. And then we cut back to the final scene, which is Otto sitting at the lunch table, and he looks lost in thought and conflicted. And Laura asks him what's wrong, and he says that I don't remember a lot about what happened, but there was something that I can't explain. I was losing. I could feel myself slipping away, but then something happened, like a sudden burst of strength. Like I say, it's hard to explain. And then Wing and Laura are like, oh, well, you got your second win, no big deal. And he goes, I suppose, but this was different somehow. It was almost like there was someone else. But then the rest of the kids just kind of move on from this, and I actually got kind of ticked at the rest of the students because they completely move on from the idea that, like, Otto literally just told them, hey guys, I'm possessed. And they're like, interesting. By the way, you agreed to do my homework? I was so mad. And I know that Otto didn't really give them any specificity that they could use, but they also just kind of move right past this. Like they move directly past this. So that's not acknowledged at all. So Shelby gives Otto and Wing her political homework, or her politics homework, and the boys are like, well, I guess we have to do this since we agreed to. It says, Otto sat listening for a few moments to his friend's banter, but despite the familiar chatter, there was still something distracting him, something he couldn't shake, a phrase that kept rattling around inside his head. You are not alone. So yeah. Overall, this is a really, really important novella. Like, I like The Expanse, which has a bunch of novellas, and even though those novellas are really, really good, none of them are as plot relevant as Interception Point is. Interception Point introduces a lot of concepts that are addressed in the coming books. The Black Liquid, Sebastian Trent having access to glove technology, the thing inside Otto's head. Yeah, but I'm really glad that we got it, because maybe this could be considered a spoiler, but it is literally the first scene of the following book. But in the next book, we are going to gain another main character who is a kid. And now the main four whose dynamic the entire series has rested on is going to become 5. And the dynamic is changed by the presence of an additional person. So this is really the last hurrah for the main 4, at least for a while. I'm trying to remember if there is another mission after this where it's actually these 4 kids working together. And I don't know. So, like I said, Escape Velocity had very little character material for the children specifically. And I'm glad that we got this because this series is very ambitious with the number of ideas that it tries to integrate. There's a lot of plot lines, there's a lot of characters for the word count, and it always feels like it could be longer. So I'm glad we got this extra side material where we actually get to see the kids in conflict with each other, and we get to see how they work together when they aren't at their best. Yeah. And I'm really glad that I didn't like it the first time and I only read it once, because I remembered almost nothing about this and I got to effectively experience it for the first time again. Next week we are moving on to Dreadnought, the 4th book. I can't tell you where we're going in this one because it's a spoiler, but it's the one where they gain another student. Yeah. See you next time.